Good morning, at least from where I sit on the west coast of Northern California. I just want to name that I have a device that I'm looking at now. Some of you can see me looking at you so that I can go live on Instagram. And then over here is where I'm live on YouTube and Facebook. And just want to acknowledge sort of the inherent awkwardness of this dual screen situation. I'm going to mostly look this way because that's where I'm most comfortable, honestly. And I apologize to those of you who might be watching here if this is sort of like an awkward angle when I'm looking in this direction. So thank you for being here, and thank you for being here, whether you're live while I'm talking, whether you're coming back and watching the replay. I welcome you into this space. It's morning where I am. I recognize that even if you're here live, it may very well be afternoon or evening, depending on where you are located in space and time. And wherever that is in this kind of wild, global, virtual community that we exist in at this current time in history, I welcome you into this space. So I titled this this piece, if you will, the bread and butter of teaching and transmission. And I just want to acknowledge, like, I'm being a little bit cheeky with that. I'll get into this in a minute. That's the part I want to touch on first. It's really this idea of, for me, this is about distinguishing between teaching, which is one thing, like what is our teaching, or what do I want to teach? As a facilitator, as a coach, as a transformational teacher, whatever, however we hold that, what is it that I want to teach, and how that's actually distinct from transmission? What is it that I either am or want to or desire to transmit? Those are two different things. And then from there, I want to dive a little bit more into this idea of that which we have embodied is that which we will transmit. And I want to look at it from two angles. One is really checking, what am I transmitting? So there's jumping ahead to this idea of, like, what do I want to transmit? What do I hope to transmit? What is it I want people to get from me? And then what is actually being transmitted? So that's sort of one piece of that. And then the other is really this idea, what does it actually mean to embody something? So our idea, what maybe we have learned, what we have understood, and then what is actually being transmitted. And through this whole being, when we talk about our whole being, that's really what we're talking about with embodiment. Like, what is our being actually cultivated such that it can come through us, not like what we just try to get other people to understand, but that can be transmitted through us. So those are the pieces. I want to also acknowledge these are like huge topics. And right off the bat, I'll just say, of course, I'm going to say that this is why, for instance, the program that I offer, Fierce Grace, is 8 months long, because we really dive into both distinguishing teaching and transmission. We also dive into embodiment and truly embodying that which it is we want to transmit. So there are places that if this really speaks to you, there's other people too, obviously, to learn these things with and from. And there are places that if this speaks to you and you're drawn to me, that you can certainly find out more and learn more. I'm going to try to keep this like, I'm a talker. Anyone that's been around here for a while knows, like, I think I have lipstick on my teeth, that I'm a talker. And I really do my best to bring things into a little bit more conciseness. So with that said, I often work with people, and it came up recently in a year-long teacher training that I'm co-teaching, really this piece around teaching and transmission. And when we brought this into this space, this idea of what is it you want to transmit, right? If you're stepping into this year-long teacher training with us, For me, when I stepped into that, I was like, okay, well, what matters most to me is supporting people in cultivating their capacity to transmit that which they most deeply wish to transmit as teachers, facilitators, and coaches. And so, first, I think that does actually require us to take some time and begin to go, what is it that I most wish to transmit? What do I most deeply, it's not necessarily just one thing, but I think often focusing on one thing at a time is valuable. So if I really, sink into that, if I think about it, if I meditate on, like, whatever your ways, if I dream on it, if I land in the truth of it, what is it that I most deeply want to transmit? And when we asked the students, a lot of what came forward actually had to do with what they want to teach. Like, oh, my transmission is, in the realm of consent practice, or my transmission is around polarity practice, or my transmission. And I really realized in that I was like, oh, this is like a whole distinction that just really isn't out there very much. And so I want to speak somewhat briefly. I want to recognize this is just touching the surface of it, but even naming. So I might want to teach, well, let's put it this way. I may want to transmit, right? Like, my desire may be to transmit safety, feeling of safety, an experience of safety. I want everyone around me to feel safe. I want people who come into my space to feel safe, right? So let's say that's a desire I have as a transmission. Now, the way that I do that is my teaching, or the vehicle, right? And it could be the teaching, or it could be the program, or it could be the container, the format. So teaching and transmission. And the reason I call it the bread and butter of teaching transmission is this. Well, first of all, I love both bread and butter, but I really love butter. So I consider the butter is the transmission. And the vehicle through which I use to bring that to other people, to bring it, well, let's just start with other people, like how I'm going to serve that to other people, that's the bread. Or that's the rice, right? I can put butter on rice. Or it's the sweet potatoes. I can put butter on sweet potatoes. It's the oatmeal. I can put butter in oatmeal. Or there's many, many different kinds of bread, right? I can put butter on baguettes. I can put butter on olive bread. I can put butter on cinnamon raisin bread. I can put butter on stale bread. I can put butter on toast. I can put butter on crumpets. So you think about that piece, like, that's the program, that's the offering, that's the container, that's the vehicle. The bread, the crumpets, the types of bread, the toast, the yams, I put butter on my broccoli, right? So, like, there's nothing you can't put butter on. There's probably something. But that's the vehicle. But that's where most people focus. They're like, I have to figure out, what is the program? What is the offering? What is the, what is the thing? What is the teaching? But that's actually, and I'm not going to say that that's not important, but that can change. I can offer many, 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 many different types of specific teachings, or specific programs, or specific ways of working with me. And within those, even the teaching, right? I have a program that's all about boundaries. I have a program that's all about pleasure, purpose, power. I have a program that's called Relationship by Design. I have a program, I have all of these different ways. Within that, there are transmissions that it is my desire that they actually stay the same, or that there is a through line, like what it is that I want to transmit. And for me, without delving too deeply into this, I'd say a big part of that really has to do with belonging. That the feeling, not even the idea, right, but the feeling that I want people to have when they're in my space, and that I want them to have through working on their boundaries, that I want to have through the work they might do relationally, that I want them to have in their experience of pleasure, purpose, power, right? A big part of it has to do with the actual feeling that they have, that who they are as they are the being that they are, they're not broken, they don't need fixing, they don't need to change. Like who they actually are belongs where they are in life and on earth. So when I say belonging, right, I can sort of say what I want to transmit is belonging. And then ultimately it's this actual, it's not an idea, it's not a concept. I could talk about belonging, right? There, I might have a teaching about belonging. And this is where this bridges to the second topic of what does it actually mean to embody something so that it is transmitted. I mean, first of all, what does transmission mean? And I'll touch on that in a minute. But the truth is, I could stand in front of all of you. I could sit in front of all of you. You could be with me live, or you could be with me virtually, you could be in any number. I mean, I could have an entire program that's all about belonging. Hashtag might happen. And I could have brilliant ideas and teachings on belonging. And I could have brilliant sound bites, and I could have, really, really intelligent and important things to say. And I could also be transmitting something else. And that's the piece around embodiment. And this is a piece that I think gets missed a lot around transmission, which is that we only think of transmission as an outward gesture. So if I have a transmission, it's what I want to transmit as like a gesture to you. I want to give this to you. And that is only one piece of transmission. I think of it more like a triangle, if you will, or a three-legged stool that really needs all three to be stable. So I also have to actually, I want to say, feel that which I wish to transmit to you, I also need to be receiving. And in that way, it actually becomes reciprocal. Transmission is an act of, like, true transmission, I would say, is a deep experience of reciprocity, because I cannot give to you that which I am not willing to receive. So if I do not, and again, it's like I use the word believe here, but it's not a belief like an idea, right? If I don't believe that I belong, which means I don't have that knowing. And this is where I want to talk about what embodiment really is. But if I don't have that deep knowing, if I'm not willing to dive deeply into the exploration and receive my own belonging as a being on this earth, as who I am in the community that I am, in the place that I am, at the actual time in history that I exist, then I cannot fully transmit that to you. I can't offer that. I can offer lots of interesting ideas, thoughts, intelligent things to think about, and you can understand them. But there is a difference, and I would hazard a guess that most of you have had some experience of receiving something from another person that you couldn't maybe quite put into words or put your finger on. But you knew it. In their presence, you knew something, you felt something, you had an experience that may or may not have been the thing they were talking about. And it's often the reason that people choose to be in the presence of someone, right? A teacher. There's that sense, I don't know exactly why, I can't exactly express why, but I know that that's where I'm drawn. And a lot of that has to do with transmission. It's that feeling of being in their presence. Oh, they're actually giving, gifting, offering, transmitting, creating the field of something around them that we find useful, valuable, important in some way. Now, so just to use this example before I go into then what transmission or embodiment as an exploration versus an arrival or something we can accomplish. I just want to name, and again, many of you have probably had this experience as well, which is that somebody can be talking about something and we could be feeling something different. So just to use the idea of belonging, and I know safety is different, but I'll sort of say, or safety, if I get consumed with, and again, this is like a deeply positive intention, deeply positive intention. But if I'm really consumed with making sure that you feel safe to the detriment of even noticing what's going on for me, right? I might be feeling like, oh my God, but what if this isn't? What if this? What's going on actually inside me? Even if I'm keeping like a good face about it, there's something inside me that goes like, it could not be safe. Something could not be safe. Someone might not feel safe. And I need to, I am anxious about making sure that that doesn't happen. That the likelihood that will actually be transmitted is sort of an anxiety more than that deep sense of peace or safety or belonging. Or if there's some part of me that really wants to make sure that you feel like you belong, but I don't feel like I don't belong unless you let me know that you feel like you belong, or there's that sense of holding myself separate. This happens a lot with this desire to create community. Okay, I'll show up for you. I'll do for you. I'll show up for you so that I can, because this is what it is to be in community, right? To give and to give and to give, but the lack of willingness to actually be on the receiving end of what it means to actually be in community. Oh, that means I need to receive. Also, that's the reciprocity. So, just checking in for a moment about, so the bread and butter, the transmission's the butter. So I like this comment, now I want butter. Pretty much always want butter. More butter. Funny little side note, my daughter used to just eat butter straight. But now she's the one in our household that like doesn't want more butter on her bread. I'm like, are you even my child? So recognizing that that which we wish to transmit can actually stay the same, and we can offer it through many vehicles, and that people may want or need, or even that the transmission itself can be served most deeply sometimes through different vehicles. Oh, you're going to really be able to receive my butter on a sweet potato. Oh, you're really going to be able to receive my butter on a baguette. But it's not about like, oh, I'm changing who I am to morph for other people, or that which I'm offering actually changes. Just the recognition that either my own, what matters to me, and how I want to serve up butter might change, or that, I have someone who's gluten-free and they get a sweet potato, but they can still receive actually the transmission. So I would encourage, just for that piece, an inquiry or a way to start to delve into that in your own self really is that sense. Oh, and this is the part I wanted to say, right? The three pieces. Yes, it is what it is that I want to offer people. That is actually one of the points on transmission. It's just not the only one, and it's the one that gets the most. Like that's what everybody thinks it is, right? What do I sort of like press out towards you? That's the transmission. So that matters. What it is that I want to convey, are you getting it? That does matter. Equally important is, am I experiencing it or receiving it? Because that means that I actually have the capacity to transmit it. And that speaks to this third one, which is sort of subtle. And it's not exactly a combination of the first two, but there's a way that it's related to being a combination of the first two, which is just that which people feel or experience simply being in my presence, not when I attempt to transmit it. So not when I specifically make the baguette to give you the butter, but that sense of not just when I stand up in front of people as a teacher, or when I sit with someone as a coach, or when I show up on social media to offer a teaching. Not only then is there a desire to transmit, and this is where it turns into the embodiment piece, right? When I walk through the world, this is where we really get to ask the question, not as a self-judgment, not as a way of like around perfectionism or, failure or success, but really this inquiry of just walking through the world. What is it that the people around me experience? And I know this isn't exactly the same because it's still in the realm of like my work in the world or what I've put forward. But I remember when I was, for the first time really putting together like a nice website. And gosh, maybe 7 years ago now, something like that, 7 or 8 years ago. And I had had like a really shitty website, but at least I existed on the internet. and and was working with someone to put together something that was beautiful and really felt good. And I realized that, I mean, there were a couple pieces here. I won't go into the second one just as a distraction, but my guiding light, if you will, or kind of my orientation, my compass orientation in putting it together was coming back to this idea of how do I want people to feel in my presence. So if I'm physically with a person, how do I want people to feel with me? And and then having this idea that if the only place that some people ever came into contact with me was visiting my website, my intention is that they get some feeling like what I hope they feel if they sit with me in person. So for me, I mean, again, I don't want to go way down this rabbit hole, but the intention of a website could be to hook people's attention or to get them to buy or to, I mean, just all kinds of things to make sure they don't leave the site or to click through to this, or that could be the intention. And I'm not going to say that pieces of that don't have value. I mean, I want people to buy my programs too, but my deepest intention, the most important lens that I was running every decision through, like what image do I use, what language do I use, do I have scrolling banners? Do I have pop-ups? Do I have like what are these things that are there? Was if this is the only experience that anybody ever has of me, which is probably true. There's probably lots of people where this is going to be the only experience they ever have. What matters most to me is that there's some sense that they feel at least a little bit more the way that I would hope people feel with me if they were to have a long conversation with me in person. And I want people to breathe more deeply when they come in contact with me. This is my hope. I'd like people to feel like they rest more firmly in the spot that they are, that they feel like they're more able to exhale and feel sort of more okay. Again, whether this is happening consciously or cognitively or not, like what I would love is if people left my presence feeling more, at least a little bit more, this sense that actually it's okay for them to be who they are on this earth right now. And so that was and continues to be sort of this guiding principle around my website, or how I talk about my programs, or how I quote launch my programs or enroll them, or these pieces like, okay, if this is the only piece that people come in contact with, I hope that something of this is conveyed, that actually you're okay just as you are. And so that's that third piece, which is I shouldn't need for people to step into my containers or my programs or, work with me as coaches or, anyway, any of these things in order to be able to offer that transmission. And I want to clarify that by embodiment, to me, is not like, oh, I've embodied it. That means that I have it as an arrival, like something that's done. Like, well, I didn't feel belonging and then I worked on it and now I have embodied belonging and it is this and thus and that way now forevermore. And so now I can transmit belonging because I have embodied it, like a thing that we could do or achieve or be done with. What to me, embodiment isn't so much like an arrival or an achievement as it is an exploration. It's an ongoing, I mean, honestly, and I hope this sounds exciting to you and not like a, some sort of a heavy sentence on you, but to me, it's a lifetime exploration. that which matters to us, that which we would like to cultivate in ourselves, that which we would like to offer to others. This is a lifetime exploration. Things like belonging, things like intimacy, things like love, things like freedom. These are not things that we embody and then we have them. These are things that we work with within ourselves for the rest of our lives. And truly, our capacity to transmit them is, we only continue to have that capacity if we are willing to continue to work with them. And what that is, we might hit, like, if it's a spiral, which I really believe it is, right? In this spiraling journey of life where I touch on, like, whoa, okay, belonging. And then I come back around and I go, oh, new layer. Oh, new layer of belonging. Or, oh, I thought I had that. And then something happened and I realized there's this whole other place that was unexplored in me. And now I'm bumping against a new layer of this. Or, and we just go around and around. And that truly, when we work in this way, it's like an ongoing willingness and capacity to be deeply changed from the inside out through this exploration. And that we might even, like, what we thought about belonging, it changes. The willingness to actually be changed by something, that's embodiment. Because it's the way that, this is why breath is so powerful. And I promise you, I will not get derailed by this. But breath, right? The inhalation and the exhalation is actually one of our most, if not the most, tangible experience we have of taking that which is outside of us, inside of us, and allowing it to change us. We are changed with every inhalation, and then we offer something different back out with every exhalation. You really drop down into this. The sort of breath craze that we're in right now, you just realize how shallow it is, right? Rather than like, oh, we are literally taking, life force, that which allows us to live, and we bring it inside of ourselves and allow it to change us. And then we offer it back out, also changed. And that everything that we do in this life, that is embodiment, right? That we bring something within us, that we work it within our body and our being, such that we are actually deeply changed by it at a cellular, bodily, energetic level. And then we have the capacity to offer it back out as a transmission, both in the sense of like, oh, now I can consciously, say or do or be something that would potentially actually have the impact or the transmission that I most deeply desire. But also that way that we can walk through the world and we literally do transmit some feeling of this because we have allowed it to come into our being and change us at such a deep, deep level that it moves out from us without necessarily our like conscious transmission. Which again, if I just bridge this all the way back to the beginning, it's one of the reasons that it's actually valuable sometimes to start with, rather than starting with what do I want to transmit, start with like, well, what am I transmitting? How do people actually feel around me? Do they feel more comfortable or do they feel more anxious? And I would call, just to sort of name this, right, out in the world, there's what I would call sort of like faux transmission. They are transmissions, but it's like, it is possible. It's possible to trick people. Anyway, won't go into that so much, but yes, people can be tricked by, smoke and mirrors and light shows, and there's sort of like faux transmission of certain things. But if people are given the opportunity to drop down deeper, often what we find like, oh no, what are they actually experiencing? Oh, I feel like I need you or I won't be okay. Right? That's a transmission, which is different than you are actually fundamentally okay just the way you are. They're different transmissions. And I can talk about you're fundamentally okay just the way you are, and then I can transmit, but you need me to feel that way. So buy my product. Right? There's a lot of that going on in the world. And it can honestly, I also just want to name, like, it can be really frustrating because it works. Right? So for those of us that really deeply care about, like, no, what are we actually creating at this energetic signature level? And I'm unwilling to create people who think that they need something to be okay, which means that I actually may like make less money, or my following may grow more slowly or something, and then I see people that I can tell or feel, right, are actually hooking people in that way, and it's working. It can be very, very frustrating. But again, my deeper value, and you can learn that. There are people also teaching that, right? You can learn that. But I have this deep value. It's like, if I were to, um, what I want for teachers, coaches, and facilitators is to, I mean, the world I want, I guess the world I want is for us to change the culture by, like, oh no, there is this way. There is this way, and it also works because this is the world that we want to live in. Which I mean, I don't know. Maybe you want to live in a different world, but most of the people I talk to, when we really get down to it, like, of course, yes, we want success, or we need money, or, there's all these things, but fundamentally, the people that I find want to be in my sphere, or that I want to be in their sphere, are the people who would like to live in a world where it's not blame, shame, and judgment that drives us, and that accomplishment isn't necessarily driven by lack and anxiety and fear. Like, we can actually move towards that which we truly desire, not away from that which we are afraid of. And that we are given both opportunities and cultivate the capacity to make choices that come from a feeling of wholeness and fullness, not a feeling of brokenness and lack. So, in whatever way it's valuable to tease apart, for those of you who might have a teaching, or programs, right? And to go, like, oh, so that's the vehicle. And what is the transmission? All right. What is it that no matter what I'm teaching, or what the program or the container is, this is actually the feeling that I want to be transmitting, right? Teasing that apart. And then I find most important then again is, and this is for everybody, not just teachers, facilitators, and coaches, but for all of us that have something that we would really love for people to feel in our presence, that it becomes imperative that we be willing to explore, how am I feeling that? Am I feeling that? And what is required, right, at the practice level? What is actually needed in my life in order for me to consistently be cultivating this feeling actually inside myself? If I want to transmit a feeling of abundance to other people, what is required in my life? And I guarantee it's not more money, but what is the actual day-to-day, moment-to-moment, consistent practice that's actually required, such that I am having an experience of abundance that I can then actually transmit? Or if it's freedom, right? If what I want to transmit to people, no matter the program, the offering, the experience, the teaching, I want people to feel free or liberated, um, then what is actually required of me so that I feel free, or that I have an experience of liberation inside myself? And again, I'm just going to close with the reminder that that doesn't mean I have to feel free every single moment of every single day, or that I'm liberated like an act of perfection or an arrival, but that this is this lens that I can keep coming back to if I'm not feeling free, as like, not as a blame, shame, judgment gesture, but as a true curious gesture, an inquiry, a willingness to engage. What is actually needed for me to feel free? What is the breath that's needed for freedom? What is the gesture? What is the stillness? What is the movement? What is the conversation? What is the engagement with life, or the engagement with that which is greater than me or the divine, in order that I actually feel free in my life or liberated. So I meant for this to be about 30 minutes. I'm just over. And again, whether you are here live or whether you're watching the replay, I honor your attention. And I'm always welcome to the comments, the conversation that might come from this, that might be questions or shares about how this applies to your life. You don't have to agree with me. There might be things that I said where you're like, well, I don't know if that's true. And I'm totally open to that kind of dialogue as well. And I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day or evening, or a beautiful, restful sleep, if that's the time of day it is for you. Ciao.